All right, well, good morning. If you can't find me, I'm down here. Hello, everyone. All right. I'm trying to outsmart you because I know nobody sits in the front. And so instead of me being a mile away on the stage, I'm going to walk around and look right in the eye at you very closely all morning just to punish you for sitting so far back. All right? Just kidding, all right? Hopefully we do get uncomfortable and talk about God and stuff this morning and get to know some new people and share where we're at in our faith and stuff like that. And I just want to start out by asking a question. When it comes to being a big picture person or more of a detailed person, which are you? You could put yourselves in one of those categories. If you're not sure, let me give you a few examples. Maybe if you're a person who loves having people over your house, but constantly your guests are finding themselves stuck in your bathroom without toilet paper, then you might be a big picture kind of a person, all right? If you're somebody who thinks Microsoft Excel is cool, you might be a detailed person. If you're, somebody back in the back cheered for that, yeah. If you're hiking in Colorado and you stop and you're just enjoying this beautiful scenery out in front of you, you could just look at it forever, but you fail to notice that on the trail just in front of you is a bear. You might be a big picture kind of a person, all right? If you alphabetize your spices like my mom does, you might be a detailed person, all right? I'm a detailed person. Anybody else in the room there with me? More of a detailed person? All right, sounds good. We never celebrate that in church. I think that's to celebrate. I love doing email. I love to-do lists. I'm the kind of person who, my family's taking a 2-week road trip through Colorado, the Grand Canyon, and Utah, doing some tent camping next summer, and I'm already stressed out that I don't have the itinerary planned and where I'm staying every night. Anybody else with me? You're kind of like that? All right. And who's the type of people who are like, I would do that trip and I would maybe start thinking about it the day before? Who's those kind of people? All right, sounds good. All right. Why we're talking about all this is because we're looking at a passage today, Acts chapter 18. So go ahead and turn there, whether it's on your phone or a real Bible. It's not going to be on the screens at all. And so you definitely need to turn to Acts chapter 18. It's a passage where it's easy to, in all the little details that are happening here, kind of lose sight of the bigger picture of what's happening in the whole book of Acts. And so we want to get into some details without losing sight of what's going on in this whole book. So, what is Acts chapter 18 all about? It's about our DNA statement for today. It's about doing life together. But it's not about just doing life together for the sake of doing life together. There's a greater purpose for doing life together here in Acts chapter 18, and I think for our lives too, and that's where we're going today. Let me tell you what I mean. What's this greater purpose? If I could broadly categorize people into maybe 3 groups who go to our church when it comes to doing life together. Maybe the first group of people is those who would say, I attend regularly, maybe I come every week, maybe I just come once a month, something like that, but I wouldn't really say that I'm doing life together with other people. Maybe this is you. You'd say, I'm not in a journey group. I don't really serve alongside other people who are getting to know me. I don't have people who I'm mentoring or people who are mentoring me in the faith. I'm here, but I'm not really doing life together with anybody. That's one group of people. The second group of people who are probably here at CCC is those who you really are doing life together. You're in a journey group maybe. You come to this service on a regular basis, and you sit here with the same people and have great discussions from week to week. By the way, if that's you and you're at a table with somebody who you love discussing with, look them in the eye and say, I love coming to church with you every week. All right? That's cheesy if you just did that, okay? I can't believe you guys do the things that I ask you to do, all right? If you're a visitor, sorry if that was an awkward moment for you, all right? I told you it's going to be a little uncomfortable. But yeah, so you're in community, but maybe you challenge each other even, which is a great thing. You support each other. You make meals when somebody's in the hospital, stuff like that. But maybe there's no larger goal to what you're doing when you do life together. Maybe this would be the journey group that's been meeting for years but hasn't changed. It's the same 4 couples and nobody new's added, nobody's left, something like that. It's community together, but there's no greater purpose to that. And then the third group of us who are here are probably those who would be people who do life together, but there's a deeper sense of purpose to that. And that deeper sense of purpose is we're going to do life together like they did in Acts for the goal of making disciples of Jesus for kingdom impact. That's what we're about. That's why we do community. It's not community for community's sake, but it's community for a larger goal's sake here. This is the journey group that says to our staff, hey, when somebody new comes to the church, make sure you assign them to our group because we want more people. This is the kind of journey group that is dividing as the years go on because they're either adding people or they've identified, man, we're kind of getting comfortable and we need to split and reach more people with this journey group. This is the kind of journey group who does what Pastor Mark challenged us to a while ago, and they have an empty chair in their room for the idea that we're not just here for this nice, holy Christian huddle, but we want to be on mission to reach one more person for the gospel of Jesus Christ, all right? 3 kinds of groups that do life together a little differently. And I wonder for you, as you think about yourselves, how much are you doing life together? And how much are you doing life together for a deeper purpose? And so with all that in mind, in Acts chapter 18, hopefully open in your Bibles, we're talking about doing life together for this greater purpose of making disciples of Jesus for kingdom impact. And here's how we're going to do this. It's going to be very dependent on you at your tables to discuss and read this. Like, I'm not reading through the passage. You're actually going to be doing that at your tables. There's 4 different sections of this we're going to read. And we're going to have you guys read the whole chapter in these 4 sections. So I'll say, hey, read these verses and discuss them. But here's the deal, all right? I'm not going to be at your tables to make sure that this is happening, but your job is to stay on track. Don't point at the person at your table who usually doesn't stay on track, okay? Don't do that right now. But your job is to talk about where you see people doing life together in these passages. Your job isn't just to talk about a table, something that's interesting to you, or this was confusing, or this was cool, let's talk about this. No, your job is to talk about where do you see doing life together in here, all right? So the first set of verses that I'm going to give you 3 to 5 minutes, I don't know, per section, and then in between we'll talk about them a little bit, is it'll be on the screen in case you forget, verses 1 through 5, all right? Chapter 18, verses 1 through 5, and just a few questions that might guide you. If you're a details person, you're going to follow these in order, okay? And if you're a big picture person, you'll just get the idea that we're supposed to be talking about doing life together, all right? But read these and, like, who do you see doing life together? What are they doing together? And then what does that teach us about how we do life together, all right? So you got 3 to 5 minutes at your tables. Dive into it. Don't hesitate. And then I'll come back up in a few minutes. Go for it. There we go. Give you guys like another 30 seconds or so to wrap that one up. All right. Let's talk about that a little bit. I don't know what you talked about. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I think I heard this table over here say the word Milli Vanilli, maybe, though, over there. That's amazing. That was my favorite band back in 1993 or whatever, okay? Anyway, I don't know what that has to do with life. I think they, as a band, really did life together is probably where you were going with that one, all right? I love it. I love it. So I don't know what you guys saw in there, but I think for this first set of verses, you really kind of got to read between the lines. There's not a verse in this chapter that says, thou shalt do life together, okay? It's not like black and white like that. You kind of got to read between the lines, all right? So, for example, I think what you see here is you see God bringing a group of different people together, all right? So you've got who in verse 2 does it say that is coming from Italy? Aquila and Priscilla, yeah, God brings them there. And who do they join? It says in verse 1, who do they join in Corinth? They join Paul there, all right. And then jumping down to verse 5, who else does God bring and join them later on? Silas and Timothy, all right. I don't know how much you know about them, but can you imagine what it would have been like to be a part of that group? If you just know a little bit about some of those people, you've got Paul, who was maybe the greatest missionary of all time, the guy who wrote half of the New Testament. Hanging out with him. We later in this chapter, we learned they were together 18 months here in Corinth. Okay, what would it be like to be with Paul for 18 months? You got Timothy, who's maybe Paul's greatest, most well-known disciple of all time. And you got all these people together doing life together. Again, it doesn't say exactly what they were doing, but you can kind of guess, right? As you read between the lines, what it would have been like. Imagine eating with them, praying with them. Imagine what they would have shared about what they saw Jesus do and what he was like and stuff like that, doing ministry together. Do you think there were times where they were like, man, how's your purity? How are you doing with what you're looking at and what you're not looking at? How's your Bible reading? Are you getting up early, connecting with God, stuff like that? And I'm sure that was happening. And the question for us here is, do you have people in your life like that? Like a group of people that you do life together with? Paul, he was kind of the hub. He was kind of the mentor of this group, but as we read throughout the New Testament, we see that Paul was encouraged right back from these people that he was mentoring them. I wonder, do you have somebody in your life like a Paul, a mentor who is pushing you to grow in your faith? Is there anybody like that in your life? Do you have people who you're helping grow in their faith that would, if they would say, if I could say to them, hey, who's helping you grow in your faith? Write a list that they would write your name down. Is there people like that in your life? Well, that's what's going on here, and it's great because they're doing life together, and the gospel is spreading because of it. There's this amazing purpose, all right? Cool, let's move on to the next set of verses 6 through 17. Go ahead again and take 3 to 5 minutes. Read those and discuss at your tables where you see life together happening in these verses. Go for it. Check. Am I on still? Oh, yeah. So that doesn't work. It's on mute, right? All right, take another minute or so to wrap up discussions on that section there. Go for it. All right, looks like you guys are getting it figured out. Hopefully gave you enough time there. What did you guys see about doing life together in there? Did you guys talk about verse 6 at all? Kind of an interesting verse. But when the Jews opposed Paul and became abusive, he shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I'm clear of my responsibility. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles." What does that have to do with doing life together, all right? He shook out his clothes, literally shook the dust out of them. And what he's doing is he's saying, man, I did everything I could do to let you know about Jesus, and you guys have hard hearts. You're not receptive to it. And so I feel like God is moving me on to minister in other places, like I'm leaving you behind. And what happens to you because of your decision not to be receptive to God, that's on you, okay? And I think what we see about doing life together here is that sometimes if somebody's not open, somebody that you're trying to reach out to and minister to or do life together with, it's okay to move on if you feel like God is moving you on in a situation like that. We've got to make sure that the Spirit is leading. But I think there's times where God calls us to, leave behind the 99 sheep and pursue somebody who's really difficult to pursue, somebody who's not super receptive, somebody we've got to keep going after them again and again and again. Like, I love people that have a heart to do stuff like that. But I think most of the time, God calls us to spend our best energy with people who are going to be receptive to doing life together with us, all right? People who really want to grow as disciples. But here's the deal. I don't think our problem in U.S. Christianity in 2019 is what Paul experienced there. That I think quite the opposite when it comes to doing life together is our problem, is that we tend to move on not too slowly, but too quickly. I think one of the best and most difficult parts about being involved in a church is that you're forced into relationships with people that sometimes is really fun and amazing, and sometimes is really, really difficult, and it stretches us and it grows us in our spirituality. Being involved in doing life together, it forces us to learn to forgive people when they hurt us. It forces us to get along with people who our personalities might not naturally connect with each other. It forces us to be on mission alongside people that do things differently, think differently, act differently than us. And what I see so often is people who get a little bit uncomfortable in church, and when trouble comes, instead of continuing to press into doing life together, what do? We move on, don't we? We quit serving in that area we were serving in because maybe we don't like the way our supervisor treated us or something like that. We find a new journey group to where everybody will get along a little better. We, at its worst, we leave. I don't know if this is always bad, but we leave and go to a new church just because it's a little bit uncomfortable for us in community. And I think when we do life together, part of what we need to do is stay with it and connect and let the difficulty of community force us to become more like Jesus so that we can do life together and so that we can make disciples of Jesus for kingdom impact. And so, sometimes we need to shake out the dust and move on if God's calling us to move on, but many times we need to hang in there. We need to forgive. We need to ask for forgiveness. We need to work together, and we need to let doing life together with other people mature us. Where else in that section did you see people doing life together? I saw verse 8. I like that verse. It's just little quick snippets in here, little details. It says, Crispus, the synagogue ruler, and his entire household believed in the Lord. You just read over that. Like, that's pretty amazing, right? But it's just a little detail in here. And many of the Corinthians who heard him believed and were baptized. The idea here that jumped out to me was the idea of a person in a family prioritizing faith and doing life together in a family and saying, this is what we're going to do. My guess is that Crispus led his family in doing life together and moving toward Jesus. Now, we don't have time to get into scripturally. Is that in a family? Is that a man's job? Is that a woman's job? Who should take the lead in that? We're not going to get into that. But what I want to do highlight is that from cultural studies over and over again show that generally when a man in a family steps up and says, you know what, family, we're going to do life together. Jesus is going to be a priority, and we're going to make church and the things of Jesus a priority in our lives. It's amazing how often what happens? The family follows, right? And so, men, I want to challenge us to lead our families in spiritual things. That's another way that we can do life together, is by not just doing it here at church, but by doing it in our homes, at our dinner tables, in our cars, life together. And by the way, if there's not a man in the house doing it, the invitation is open to anybody else to step up and lead. I've seen teenagers do it. I've seen all kinds of things happen in families about doing life together. All right, next section. What do you guys see there? This is going to be verses 18 to 23. Take a few minutes to read and discuss at your tables the same questions. Where do you see them doing life together? Go for it.
And he left the brothers and sisters and sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. Before he sailed, he had his hair cut off and censure because of a vow he had taken. They arrived at Ephesus, where Paul left Priscilla and Aquila.
All right, you got about another minute to mine all the nuggets of doing life together out of there. No, different things. I'll answer it after. Good question. All right, let's talk about this section here. Where did you see them doing life together in there? Maybe just yell out a verse that you saw them doing life together. Maybe you saw stuff I didn't see. Any verses jump out? 23. Cool. Other verses that you saw them doing life together? All right, did anybody see verse 18? Did that jump out to you at all? It says, Paul stayed on in Corinth for some time. Then he left the brothers and sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. Did that jump out to you at all? That's a cool thing. I know that Mark's in here now. I know that Mark has had people follow him across the country when he's moved. They felt so connected to him, and the people who moved with him are over here too. That's awesome. Yeah, right? That's part of your guys' story, right? Have you ever had somebody that you've done life together with so closely that you're like, hey, I'm going to move across the country when they move? Maybe not, okay? I don't know that that'll be a normal thing. That'll be like, well, here's my judge for whether I'm doing life together with other people or not. But what does this mean for us? I just think there's obviously a deep connection that's there. If they feel so strongly connected to Paul that they're going to move and continue to follow him on mission. And I think just some questions for us related to this verse right here are, who's following you? Maybe not across the country, but in your spiritual life. Who's looking up to you in their faith and saying, I want to be more like that person who's like Jesus? Who's closer to Jesus because of what you've done in their life over the past month or two? Who have you spoken words of challenge to lately where you're like pressing them into something difficult or encouraging them in something they're doing really well? That's doing life together. That's the kind of stuff, again, as you read between the lines, and I'm sure what's happening. And Priscilla and Aquila are like, I want to keep being around that. I want that for my life. And so I want to keep doing life together with Paul. That's the kind of way we should be living as Christians, by the way. This isn't some radical thing of like, hey, paid church staff people should be making disciples to that level. But that's for all of us. Like just a normal thing that we should be doing as Christians is living our lives in such a way that disciples are being made, that people are growing, and then they're moving on to disciple other people, as you're going to see in this last section. So let's jump to that last section, and that's verses 24 to 28. All right, head there. You got 4 or 5 minutes to discuss where you see them doing life together there. Go for it. Check. All right, you got another minute or so. All right. This was probably for me the easiest section to see them doing life together in here because you see this intentionality that Priscilla and Aquila have, and you just see how their relationships probably went well beyond talking about yesterday's football game and what the weather's going to be like and stuff like that. And there was obviously this huge faith component to this thing. I think sometimes, it's funny, I think a couple months ago, last time I spoke in here, we kind of talked about this same idea a little bit, but this idea of just like being a normal Christian who it's not weird to talk about Jesus, all right? I think sometimes as Christians we lack the boldness even to talk about faith and Jesus to other Christians. Why is that? I was thinking about that as I was getting ready for today. I think because one, we've all seen the Christian who's super over the top about it, and we don't want to be annoying like that, right? Like you're just out to lunch with them and you're like eating a bowl of fruit and they're like, oh yeah, that fruit looks really good. It just reminds me of the fruit of the Spirit and how God wants to develop that. And it's just like so cheesy, and you're like, no, I don't want to be like that, so I'm never going to talk about it, right? Or we go to the opposite extreme where we don't want to be offensive or weird or whatever, and it's just easier to talk about everyday stuff, and we don't. And I just think being the kind of Christian who's like, man, even with other Christians, I'm going to be talking about faith and Jesus, and there's going to be an intentionality that's there that I'm asking people for prayer, and I'm praying for people, and I'm talking about what's going on in my life and stuff like that, in my spiritual life and things like that. That when you leave a room like this, we end and we say, you're dismissed. That the first thing we don't always say, it's okay to say it sometimes, obviously, right? But isn't like, hey, what's your plans for the rest of the day? But maybe you take the step of being like, man, that last song we sang really just helped me connect with God, man. Where did you connect with God during this service? Or what, you know what I mean? Like, just in a real natural way, being intentional about talking about faith. I think that's a huge way that we can do life together. What's happening here is you've got this Apollos dude who enters the scene, and he's doing some good things for God, isn't he? Let's read verses 24 to 26. It says, meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was a learned man with a thorough knowledge of the Scriptures. He'd been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor, and he taught about Jesus accurately, though he only knew the baptism of John, and he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. Is Apollos doing a good job here? Yeah, he's doing a great job. A lot of awesome things are happening there. He's got great fervor. He's teaching accurately about Jesus. He's speaking boldly, but he's still got some stuff to learn, doesn't he? And so enter Priscilla and Aquila, and they go, let's show this dude some hospitality. Let's invite him over our house. Let's do life together with this Apollos dude, and let's explain God a little bit more to him. I don't picture that being a one-time conversation, quick 60-minute meal, and then go home. Like, I picture them continuing to do life together, them discipling him, doing life together with him, so much so that he gets to the point where he becomes this in verse 27. When Apollos wanted to go to Achaia, the brothers encouraged him and wrote to the disciples there to welcome him. On arriving, he was what? A great help to those who by grace had believed. They discipled him. They did life together with him to the point that he became a great help in his faith. And now Paul's discipling them, and they're discipling Apollos, and Apollos is discipling other people. That's what doing life together is all about. There's a purpose to it, isn't it? It's not just gathering in our Christian holy huddles and doing a Bible study together and going home, but it's doing that for the purpose of making disciples of Jesus for kingdom impact together. And so as we conclude today, I think our job, as we've really dove into Acts 18, is to hold our lives up to Scripture and say, okay, this is God's best plan for my life. It's not always easy, but it's amazing. And how does my life compare when I compare it to what's going on in Acts chapter 18. And so I just want to give you like 30 seconds. I'm going to pray at the end of that to say, God, how am I doing life together? Is there something deeper that you want to call me to, or something that you want me to celebrate that you are doing, and how I'm doing life together? Talk to him about that, and then I'll close this off in prayer in just a moment. So God, I was thinking, I don't know that Acts 18 is going to jump right up there with like our top 3 favorite passages in Scripture of all time, but yet it's this amazing picture of what doing life together and doing it for the purpose of making disciples can look like. And so God, I pray that you would empower us, that you'd challenge us, that you'd move us to a point where doing life together, disciple making, would be something that we're all about, all of us. That it wouldn't just be this thing for extraordinary Christians or this thing that we get to if we have time, but this thing that's just what our lives are all about, and that our jobs and that the other things we have in our lives fall underneath our disciple-making efforts of following you in that.